really good to know. This meeting is being recorded. So in the panel discussion today, we have some speakers in the room. Steve Bam, Pamela Mooney, and Sharon Reid, and myself, Murali Subramanian. Hoping we'll have another person here soon. If not, we'll still talk about a lot of the data analytics, data engineering, BI, data science. I don't know how much I can answer about that. But DBA, BI engineer, whatever kind of questions we might have. It's not just going to be like question and answer format. I'm hoping we can have a discussion about this, about the trend of data analytics so far. So go through that. Next one is talking about the upcoming user group meeting. So next month we have teaching Python to a DBA by Sharon Reid and Allison Harris, her daughter.
Yeah, Allison is my daughter.
The mother-daughter combo doing here. Next presentation. I guess the Python part is taken care of by the daughter, DBA part is taken care of by the mom. So you'll see it's going to be an interesting session. I'm hoping to be here for that too. Once again, I mean CGI. I do want to really quickly talk about CGI too. Thank you so much for sponsoring this today and a lot of the past and the future events that they have sponsored for us. So really appreciate them. They used to be Doherty Business Solutions. Now they are parent company CGI. We do have a nice in-person conference room that we always use, and food that they give us for both lunch and dinner meetings that we have. So in case you guys are in the St. Louis region, please think about stopping by so you can take advantage of the good food that we have for free. Future events, you can see a lot of the SQL Saturday on the list, and also you can see one of ours, which is the October 25th SQL Saturday St. Louis. So we have put up an Eventbrite site up, and also a SQL Saturday site has it as a reserved date. I will also include that the link in this meeting, so you guys can go take a look at it, try and register for it. We're still in the beginning stages of it, where we have had a call for speakers and stuff like that. So if any of you are interested in that, please do let us know. And if any of the sponsors listening to this are interested in sponsoring the event, please reach out. I mean, we do have the person to reach out in both the SQL Saturday site and also on the Eventbrite site. So that's one thing. And another is Fabric Analyst in a Day. So Covenant Technology has that going. It's a Microsoft event. So it is an in-person event, and it's a Microsoft event. So Covenant Technology Technology is the Microsoft partner who is doing this, and they have done some sponsorship and some great speakers in the local St. Louis community. So if you are here and want to do a little bit more understanding about Fabric Analyst in a Day is a great way to start that. Do check it out. Do register for it. And again, going back into today's presentation, I mean, even though I'm calling it presentation, it's again, we're going to have a discussion about data analytics, data engineering, BI, and all those topics that we have in the past covered. I do want to open up if anybody has any questions beginning in the Groom, and we'll also we can take questions on the chat on the call, and as we go into the call into this topic a little bit more, we can also open their mics up so they can get into the discussion with us.
So the fabric analyst event that you mentioned, is it free or do we have to?
Yes. So the question was about fabric analyst in a day. I believe it's a free event. Usually, as far as I know, the Microsoft Fabric events are Microsoft events. Like these are normally free. Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, anybody from here, but I believe this is a free event. I have done similar Microsoft-sponsored events like Power App in a day or Power Automate in a day and stuff like that. They are all normally free events. Great question. Any other questions about? Okay. All right. Even before we go through that, I'm hoping we can see all the bio of the people here today. We're still crossing a lot of paths with developers and analysts, very frequently. So even though our expertise is in a specific item, we can definitely talk a little bit about the aspects of interaction with other BI engineers or data analysts, and for me, interaction with DBAs and stuff like that. So, any questions from the room regarding these topics before I ask my question? Okay, I do want to start with one thing. 10 years ago, the way we were storing data, the way relational databases were used, the way data warehousing was done, I feel like, I don't know if it was always an afterthought of doing the star schema, the Kimball model, or if it is just a newer trend with changes in the way courseworks are done these days, with more emphasis on the front-end object-oriented languages, and SQL is like a second-tier citizen. So if you guys have felt the same way, have you seen similar situations at your work? Are you going through the same? How are you? It's a really heavy question, but how are you transitioning to those kind of things from when you started?
So that's actually a great question to open up with. I graduated from college with a computer science technology degree in 2013. So this is right in that window. And when I was interviewing for the company that I work with, data warehousing and a tabular cube were kind of very new, very edgy concepts. Kimball was not a thing back then. When I was in school, we were taught about it, about Kimball versus Inman versus, other approaches. We were taught about at least multi-dim cubes. But there's always a disconnect, I think, between academia and the real world and how things are implemented. And it's been I think, not a unique thing to find that it's a journey, right? As everyone's knowledge evolves, we learn what we did and what worked and what we could have done better. And I think that we have seen that in the last few years. Sharon came on in, I believe, 2017, so she'll have a lot of perspective to offer to this as well. But I think over the years we have learned the value that a good data architect can drive, the value of understanding that SQL Server performs brilliantly when you use it according to directions, and it tries to perform brilliantly even when you don't. It's an amazing tool, right? But I think the biggest drive has been toward educating people at all layers of the stack, be they developers, be they data engineers, be they end users who are trying to retrieve queries for part of their job function. That education component of here is the way to do what you want to do in the best way, and being able to prove that to them, being able to show them the difference and doing that in a collaborative way has, I think, been maybe one of the largest pushes and success stories that we have had. I'm going to let Sharon speak.
I'm now not remembering the question, but talking about how it's changed over, I've been a DBA for 7 years. When I first started, there was a data engineer team. They weren't even called data engineers. And now data engineering is like the thing. Everybody wants to be a data engineer. So it's interesting to watch, what was kind of just something that some people did. Now it's been, all trendy. It's what?
Mainstream.
Mainstream, okay. It's interesting watching the changes and going to the cloud, a mix of SQL Server, Postgres, etc., just like mixing it up and how that's changing. And in some ways, I know at our company, it's not changing as quickly as what they think it is. That's my take. But it is changing, and then you have people talk about, like, I'm a DBA. You have, DBAs won't be needed anymore, and I think they've been saying that for decades. So I'm not worried about it, but my job will and has been changing. Not sure exactly how that's going to look yet. So definitely a technology in flux.
So again, just to reiterate that question, but so previously we would relational databases, we would structure the backend and taking into account all the applications that we need to get done, we'll structure the backend these days. It's just I've seen more so that we are more focused on the front end with the CI/CD, the software development cycle. That its database has become like a second tier thing, even including admin, especially things where we see cloud being capable of doing the scaling up and scaling out. So at some levels, so DBA's job has changed, which is seeing what it was before start versus now. Any other things based on what I told you want to add?
I would say that in terms of databases being an afterthought, per se, in the more current environment, I think that it depends on the company. If you have a smaller company that has a more startup mentality, it can be not uncommon to see more of a right versus right now struggle. Let's get it up, let's get it moving, put a database on it. And even, like, I know when I was in college and I was learning software engineering, it was, for your capstone, do this, and throw a database on it, you'll learn T-SQL later. But I think what we have seen and the initiative that we have pushed personally is that it really needs to be a ground level collaborative solution, because if you do not you do not consider the database, if you don't consider data retention, if you don't consider throwing things like the bright shiny feature, temporal tables. Let's use that one. Temporal tables. This is exciting. We'll keep all of this data, and we have no idea how long we'll retain it for. We'll figure it out later. That can really blow up on you. So having data professionals who understand this and can educate people from the beginning, and working to cultivate that relationship with developers and platform engineers and data engineers, which we have worked very, very hard to do, to say this is what we're good at. Give us a seat at the table to talk to you about this. Having done that has made a huge difference for us because, yes, there is a trend to say that the glamorous thing is CI/CD, the glamorous thing is analytics, the glamorous thing is APIs. But without that foundational data layer, without intelligent structuring and query optimization and baseline monitoring and all the care and feeding that goes into it, none of that stuff performs as expected. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to go back to a little bit about what I was saying before about data engineers being trendy. Sorry, mainstream. Like we now have a database engineer on our DBA team. That's how much integration that we are now doing. I would also say another change that I have seen just in the 7 years that I've been there is how much the end users, the business people are coming in. They're graduated from college with more development work than they've done before. So they might not be a developer, but they know Python. And so we've had to adjust and change in that way also. So as computer science becomes, developing, it's more democratized, then you have to adjust to that also. So another change.
Just so you know, I'm asking these questions just as a component of change and not necessarily, I am not stating myself as a good change or a bad change. There are, of course, every change has good and bad components to it.
What have you seen change?
Since the time I've started, again, the things that I've asked as questions themselves, we have done waterfall, which I would not go back to, but the emphasis was more in having a complete table structure, data modeling structure, before we even started having the application go through to the database. Now, again, software development cycle suggests that, I create like 5 columns that I just need for the time being, and then the application layer just dumps the data into those initial tables, and then we create data warehouse if we have time. If we don't, then just we decide to consume, because we do have downstream data lakes that can ingest unstructured data, even though it goes through. Somebody is like, okay, I like SQL Server, I'll still put this unstructured or semi-structured data in SQL Server because I'm used to it. We have license for it, or we have hard server on there, or even Azure SQL, and I can use JSON in it. Since they did the JSON, and XML has been there for a while, but so that has been kind of the thing that I've seen. And the second point that you mentioned was about the performance. Because of the better capabilities of all these newer technology, data lake, we use Azure Databricks. The way Spark works is a lot faster than our on-prem databases. I don't want a specific database. So that makes people not worry too much about performance, which in another way costs the bottleneck problem at some point of time because they don't code for performance, which we always thought about. Whenever I used to write code, I used to be like, okay, I'm gonna structure it this way, so I'm not doing an unnecessary join, or I'm not thinking about writing a function only at the select clause level, stuff like that. So these days, whatever is convenient happens, and then if it becomes an issue with the performance, then it gets addressed, and sometimes the query or the application causing the performance bottleneck is not even the one that causes it. The root cause is a different application that has been hogging so much memory, and you actually keep scaling up, and like can't do this anymore. One of the ones that were little smaller applications, the one that gets dinged for it. That's my.
Yeah.
Go ahead. We do have questions. Go ahead.
It's in this. So the agile and the team making the decisions and the DB concerns being a bit of a wet blanket at the beginning, and then maybe paying off days or a couple days later. Any tactics on coming to the table and not being outvoted?
Sorry, 1 second. I do want to state, if you're asking a question, you might want to put out your name and your role, your name, your role, and your company.
Gary Cap's role is a million hats. That's a problem, as it were, but the hat that is of concern is when I'm trying to actually get the data earlier of a concern than later. Sounds good. Thank you.
So I think there are two components to this. One is more short-term, one is more long-term. The long-term one is the one I will start with, and that is cultivating those relationships, right? So that there is some common understanding coming to the table in the first place. I have heard horror stories at other organizations where developers and DBAs just cross swords, or data engineers and developers cross swords. And I think that there is so much value in reassessing that and understanding and acknowledging the value that a good developer brings, and saying, hey, I really want to work with you. This is what I value about what you do, and this is where I think I can help. And that's not an overnight change, but it is an investment in time that I think is worth making. The shorter term, I think, is just evidence-based. This could be an outgrowth of experience or opportunity, or maybe you just have that chance in the meeting to bring your experience to bear, to say, hey, you're doing this, and I would like the opportunity to work up a proof of concept very quickly to show that I think this will get you across the finish line at a fraction of the I/O or CPU, and if you're in the cloud, you know, your duration, your resource usage now equals money. And I think as you begin to demonstrate the value that you drive, because this stuff does not change, right? I know that when we went to the cloud, there was this, I heard some people saying, oh, you no longer have to worry about backups because the cloud's going to handle backups. I said, great, who proves the backups are valid? Well, they hadn't thought about that. And I said, you know, I think we could probably develop a strategy for this with you. That, you know, that might be something we could help you with. Or we're going to Databricks, and we're going to set up data frames, and this is going to be super fast, but it isn't always fast. And we can say, hey, show us where you're having a problem. Let me look at your query. Maybe we can trim this down a little bit. Now you have some professional credibility, right? And as you come to the table, and I've made a point from a managerial perspective to ensure that my people are getting embedded in these groups. So they have upfront access to show where they can help. And within the team, we have a consultant model. So everyone's an expert, everyone's a generalist. For example, Sharon's area is security. She is consultable on all things security and reliability. I have another one who specializes in internals. One was a former data engineer and developer. He's my automation guy. One shows a strong analytics capability. So they can go to these meetings up front, get the information, come back. If they're not sure, consult with a team member and go back to the next meeting and say, hey, I have an idea. So that's from a managerial perspective, but I'll let Sharon speak to an implementer.
I would go back to your first one, the long-term, the relationships that you develop with people, I think make it so that the short-term managerial aspects can work. You know, I know DBAs have a reputation for being a bit grouchy. Our team has a reputation for being very nice and easy to work with, and that has made it easier for, you know, Pam to go in and do her managerial magic and getting us involved early in the process. But yeah, so I would just say relationships.
Thank you. Go ahead.
At some point, a MVP, gets larger and more profitable. The revenue changes, who you can hire, the product strategy changes, and the database layer is no longer thought of as, something that's attached on, but like something that you need to actively invest in. At what point do you decide when that happens and how to convert, an afterthought to a clear thought if, with one of the considerations being that it's an afterthought for everyone, so you can't really interview thoroughly on it.
Mm-hmm. So the question was, at what point does the database either come front of mind or become an afterthought? How do you strategize for that? How do you interview for that? I think it depends. And it depends on things like, for instance, you have a tabular cube. Tabular cubes are unfortunately not well supported. So at what point do you sit there and say, I don't think tabular cube is the solution? That's one example. A warehouse design, at what point does it make sense to maybe consider putting that either into a lakehouse or into Databricks as an analytics repository? I think these decisions come from either business value, what value do they drive to the business, how well does the solution support the business need, and in terms of interviewing for it, I think there are a couple of components. I think you have to stay ahead of what is going on and anticipate the need. And that's one thing that I do in my role is, for instance, from the time we looked at going to the cloud, I started eyeing people with automation talent and cloud experience. I also started looking at the most probable database platforms we would be looking at, started making a list. Okay, now I can support that. What's going to be the next thing? Analytics. I need someone on my team with strong analytic capabilities who is consultable by the rest of the team so that they can be brought up gradually without their brains exploding with everything else they have to do, but yet we have a presence that can say, this is what we need. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
And just to point out, I know how strong the consulting model is in your place. When you started with the word depends on your answer,
Yeah.
Depends all that to start with the depends.
It's a SQL Server classic, yeah.
Yeah. I didn't have anything to add.
I didn't hear the question. I'm sorry, I'm Clayton Groom. Nice to meet you. I used to participate a lot more regularly, but working from home instead of just up the road makes it a little harder to get in. And today was a great example of that, why I hate coming into St. Louis to work.
Road work on
Oh, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know how long it should take to get here, and it took a half hour longer, so.
2 hours later.
Yeah, exactly. So
Clayton,
I might come at it from a different perspective.
why don't you explain what your role, I know you're consulting, but why don't you explain what your current role is on the project that you're working?
I'm like I said in my bio, I'm slouching toward retirement, so I'm on my last project, I'm hoping, for clients and helping them. Currently, they're migrating ERP systems, and they have a data warehouse that I help them maintain, that I then migrated to a newer version of SQL 2022, analysis services, Power BI in the cloud for the cube, and have been working to pull in numerous data from numerous accounting and ERP systems into a standard data warehouse. Now the push is to go to Oracle Fusion, and it's a totally different platform, and the panic is we can't get our data. We get all our data from the data warehouse. Do you have the data? When's it going to be there? And so it's like my push this week is to get the first cut of Oracle data into the old data warehouse. I also have another couple people I'm working with that are getting the data into Databricks and Azure Fabric, so that those same Oracle file feeds that we get are landing in the cloud, and we can in parallel build a new data warehouse that's entirely cloud-based off the same data feed. And the reason is the other companies still are mostly on these other ERPs, and they're transitioning over time. Only one unit is currently on Oracle, and that will bump up in November, and then again in March, and then later on, the rest of the company, the next 2 years, will be on Oracle. But we have to cover our bases in the interim. So building that plug-in to get data from Oracle into the current warehouse, plus re-architecting for a totally new solution so we can just ditch all this other stuff, and we're done. That's the process. That's the project. I've been working with SQL Server since version 4.1.2 in like 1994. Worked on 7.0 or 6.5, 7.0, 2000, all the versions. Also worked on Oracle, Sybase, DB2, MySQL, and a few others. So definitely know SQL. And as far as getting into the industry, into the business, I had lots of thoughts on that, so I'm curious what your questions are. If you don't have questions, I'll have thoughts at the end.
Sir, it's going to be out of scope and too much of a business question, but how did they choose Oracle Fusion as opposed to Microsoft Dynamics or another?
I have no idea. I was not involved in that. They were actually working on a different ERP and killed that project. So I've been helping warehouse off that new ERP. And so suddenly it's like, that went away. And now it's Oracle. So they were bought out by another company. That company runs Oracle. So that's probably why.
Are there any on the... If you guys have any questions on the call, please feel free to either type it out or if Julie will be able to submit them. Questions of me.
No questions online.
Okay, again, I'm going to go through change kind of question. Again, before Clayton, the kind of questions were about changes from when we started, probably 10 years ago, even when we started 10 years ago versus now.
30 years ago.
The emphasis more so being agile now have changed into how the application is created and the back processes are thought of. How has it been at your project? how do you see that those changes working?
I think using source control and getting GitHub involved is, it's like, I won't do a project without it anymore. Early on, like, talk about 4.1.2 and 6.5, worked on a project in Ventura, California, reinsurance company, and we built an ERP basically for them. And a lot of that work was, we had a whole team of developers creating code, and I ended up creating a checksum tool to determine what views, procs, and things had been added or changed since the last day, so that we could keep current on that. And I also wrote a BCP program that spit it out as a text file, so that we had kind of version control. And so that's something that, whether it was SourceSafe or GitHub or Bitbucket or whatever, using source control, even as a DBA, is critical. It's like, I had a problem. I put a piece of code in last night, and one of these other changes that they said they tested, they hadn't tested. I'm like, oh, why is this number so high? It's not supposed to be so high. Okay, go back to source control, grab the view, drop it back into production, process it through, done. Problem solved. If I hadn't had that backup copy, even if I'd been a really good developer and kept deployment scripts and all that, I still would have had to go find it. Having it in version control, I just right-click, so give me the previous version, done, cut, paste, run, and I'm back to where we need to be. Now I got to chew on the business guy who said he tested it and didn't. So, we'll figure that out. But anyhow, version control is critical. And I've yet to work anywhere where we had it completely 100% automated, where the build automation was perfect. I would love to see that and know how to do that, but I'm not that interested. That's kind of like a task for one of those knuckleheads that loves the automation of builds, and that's not me. Give me the different kind of problem to solve. So, but that's a key piece, I believe, is having that, being able to build an automated build, and so that if I'm changing something in dev and I check it in and it passes QA, it goes into test automatically, and then from there I don't see it again. It's like if it passes test, then it's automatically pushed up. That's the gold standard. If you can do that, awesome. I'd love to talk to you after.
I think that would be a good question or presentation from Dan Guzman, who used to be, was it Scott Trade, who bought out by Ameritrade or whatever. Because I know that they heavily use, I think, version control. Now, I should ask him about if it was all automated or not.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There's a tool. There's Octopus Deploy. There's not Nestor, but it's like the icon for it's like a butler. I can't remember the name of it. Newton? No, Newton's a component manager. But there's things that make it work. And I've worked on teams where they had that pretty much working. But I generally would develop the deployment script from SQL code using Visual Studio, compares, and then go through, tweak it, and then hand that off to them, and then they would include it in the build.
That's very interesting, because in our part, at least, some of our deployments, you mentioned that it goes to Azure. The Azure one specifically, what we do have a CI/CD pipeline on DevOps board, on our DevOps site. So DevOps itself publishes based on PowerShell command through the DevOps pipeline. We do had to tweak it a little bit, because this is all objects, could be DDLs, DMLs. You don't want DMLs to run first. Those kind of simpler logic had to be built into the PowerShell itself to try to run. Yeah, we do have like a CI/CD pipeline on DevOps.
But again, it's very esoteric, it's very finicky, and it's, as far as the tool suites go, I don't know that we're there yet to make it super easy, especially integrating between applications and databases, web services, and things like that. But definitely a tool.
Version control is definitely something that has changed since I started. I've only been there 7 years. Went from not really having it, or at least we didn't, to now we have the pipelines, although we often have a broken pipeline. So what you're saying, I would definitely, yeah, anywhere in IT now, everything's version controlled. Since you just took a bite, are there more questions? Come on, ask away.
So I gathered from the request to participate from that it was like how to break into it, how to get into the data side of things. And last week I've been thinking about that as I'm working and going back through scenarios. And I would have to say there's a few key things. And one is find a rabbit hole. Just put a label on it, find a rabbit hole, and go deep. For me, it was something called characteristic functions. Like SQL in the early days really there was no case statement, there was no if statement other than if blocks. And so if you wanted to do column level logic, there was really no built-in way other than using the functions that were available to you. And these two Russian data scientists have come up with something they call characteristic functions. And I read an article about it because I was handed this article by a guy I just started working for. And he said, here, and he was my first mentor on SQL, and I learned a ton from the guy. He said, here, read this and tell me what you think of it. I read it, devoured it. I found the author's book at Pop Amp Books out in Hollywood, bought it, devoured it, and then applied that knowledge to all the things I was doing. And you may say, oh, that's no big deal. But at the time, it was. I took it, I used it to generate code. So I generate the code for things like, I want to do a function something you would do with a window function today. You would say, I want to get a year-to-date calculation in my query. Or I want to separate things into columns by period. You could do it with a characteristic function using basically add, subtract, absolute. I should have brought the book with me. Just a few of the functions, but you can in effect create 0 and 1 logic, and then use that to determine whether that value was included or not by getting 0 or a 1 and multiplying it by the column. So you can create your calculated columns with this logic. That one little thing just opened the world to me. And then the other thing was, and this kind of goes with any system or any application, is to find where the edges are. Everybody does the easy stuff, right? Find the hard thing and go figure that out. Solve that hard problem. Kathy Kellenberger, she's not here, but she's like, she authored a book on window functions, and she called me and helped with that. But I got tons of great ideas from Kathy's articles that she's published over the years. I used to follow Joe Selko when he did his puzzles in the DBAs magazine. Bought all his books, and those are the hard problems. And you will run across it in your job where there's a report or there's something that nobody else can figure it out. Well, if you're at least aware of that there's an answer to it, you can go find Joe Selko's book, pull it off the shelf, flip through, find the answer, and then went through it. A lot of times it's like finding those hard problems that nobody else can figure out and do the work to figure it out. And then that will make you an expert on, albeit a subset, but you'll be noticed as a result.
To add to that, my passion is database security, which is really funny to me that cybersecurity is so hot and trendy, but nobody cares about database security. So that's my mission, but that's what I've basically done. What Pam was saying earlier about specialist and generalist, I am all about the database security and have had opportunities because of my specialty area that I probably wouldn't have otherwise. So I am all about the going deep in one area, but stay open because, things change.
Somewhat repetitive, but to enlarge on this point from a managerial perspective, I'm always looking at trying to project the need of the business 1 year, 3 years in advance. I try not to go much beyond 3 years, and either training up my team to begin to meet that need or making the decision to onboard someone with that set of skills because I have determined that need is going to be pressing enough that we need somebody to be consultable on that. So I think if you were trying to break into the data layer, and I think I can speak to it from a DBA perspective, but I would expect this to be more or less universal. I would go deep. I agree. Find the areas of that layer, whether it's analytics, whether it's administration, whether it's engineering, that spark joy for you, and get very, very good at it, but have an overall general knowledge. And I would add to that, once you are getting pretty confident of your abilities, right, put your stuff out there for the community. Start developing helpful solutions and get it out there. It's not only going to help the community, it will help you by getting that feedback, but it will also play well for you when you go to interview.
Okay, go. Quite a few questions. Go ahead.
To follow on what you said. Okay, so first of all, you said, by the way, I'm Jennifer Finney. I work at WashU as my career coach, so I'm helping students get jobs. I'm not trying to do any of the work you're doing. So I'm just trying to understand the work they want to do and help them with that. So I had two questions out of that. The writing, like that's brilliant, we agree. Where? I think that if we say it to students, they're like, but where?
So when I started a blog, which is no longer out there, called the Non-Cluttered Index, which is a play on DBA words, and it got notice. From there, I started reaching out. I think Redgate reached out to me to write for Simple Talk, and from there, SQL Server Central wanted articles. There are, I could tell you at the database layer, but I think starting a blog is probably universally the right answer. And participating in the community forums, you know, whether that's STAG or whatever that looks like for your area that you're wanting to get into, starting to participate, starting to talk to people online and getting involved in user groups. That kind of networking and collaboration where you also have the opportunity to sharpen your skills is priceless.
Thank you for that.
I'm going to expand on that a bit. Not everybody likes to write. I actually do like to write, but I am busy. And so I have started giving presentations, and I would strongly recommend to someone, if they're interested and have that rabbit hole that they've been going down. And this group right here is a really nice way to get started on giving presentations. And if it's too scary, you can pair up with someone, and that can make it a little less scary to present. So strong. This group right here is a great way to break into that. Besides the networking, which is a benefit of coming in person, not just the pizza, but the networking and getting to know other people.
We do try to tell them that. They just don't always listen.
They can come here.
Yeah, one thing, I've interviewed a lot of green beans and a lot of college kids, and one of the things that always strikes me is that they've actually done a personal project with whatever technology it is that they're wanting the job in. Like, if you can tell me all the right buzzwords, I don't care. What did you do with it? Show me that project. Like, one guy made a hunting app for like deer tracking or some crazy thing, and I was like, really? Show me that. Oh yeah, it's on the web. And, you know, he was one of the best hires I ever had. And you know, there's people like that. One guy, I literally walked out of the interview and went to my boss and said, and Julie knows him, Scott, and I said, we need to hire this guy. What can I offer him? Just on the spot, because he was so passionate, so into what he was doing. And the poor guy was selling cars. He was selling cars for Lou Pughes, and he was one of the best technology hires I ever had. So, you know, I've hired him more than once, actually, over the years, and he's a good guy. But again, it was that passion, because they actually took it and applied it to something real. So to me, that's going to separate the goats from the sheep in terms of when I'm hiring, looking and talking to people, because it's kind of like, oh, I talk to a lot of people and kids that I know from church or community or whatever, like, oh, what are you studying? Oh, I'm working on a degree in IT. Oh, okay, IT? Yeah. What language? No, it's IT. They're learning IT management. Not to deflect and say it's a wrong career path, but it's like you're not going to get the job that you're expecting if you got an IT degree and you don't have a software engineering degree. So if you want to be in that, and if you can be that person, but you're passionate about the programming languages and you're showing the skills, that's important. But yeah, there's definitely, I've run into a number of kids like that. You should not be doing programming, because they didn't get it. They weren't excited about it. They weren't into it. And to me, it's like any career. You got to be passionate, whether it's art or race car driving. You got to be passionate about it. And I still am. I'm ready to retire. But what I want to do in my retirement is like go through all that crazy stuff I did and pull out the gems and polish them up and write about them. Yeah. And get them out there before they're worthless. Because the speed things are changing right now. A lot of that stuff isn't going to matter in 10 years. So it'd be nice to at least get them out there. Someone can use it.
The related point, the other question was going to be about the sparks joy. I think some students struggle with that. I mean, you're right. There are students that just don't enjoy it, which is a whole different problem, which we don't have to worry about. But students that get it, but still haven't figured out what sparks joy. So that's their problem. Like dive deep. They're just like, but where? Where do I start? I think that's just a tough one, right?
Start with something personal. Technology. Is there an app for your phone that you wish you had? Is there some set of data you want to understand more? You can get all kinds of free data sets and do a little exploration on it. You can do some research in effect, especially if you're doing analysis in Power BI and some of the AI technology that's out there. My daughter I was helping her with an AI script to sort fish. She was raising fish and wanted to hybridize them, but then she'd have to sort them. So we're going to make a tube that they could swim down. It was gated to sort the fish. Because AI can take a picture of the fish and go, no, that's a whatever guppy, that's a whatever, and send it down the right tube. Never finished that project, but that was something that at least got her into it and excited about it.
I just want to add to that. There is something called as Kaggle datasets, Kaggle.com, where people can go and see a lot of projects, and datasets are freely available for them to.
Thank you.
I would also have to say, sometimes you just don't know right away. I think that's fair. You get a job, you're probably not going to have the same job 20 years later, but I wouldn't have known database security would be my passion before I started working. So I think it's important to find your passion, but I don't think they have to find that before they start working.
I would agree.
I'm going to go very foundational here in a follow-up. No matter what they interview for, make sure they understand what the job is. Sharon's laughing because she knows what I'm going to. I cannot count the number of times I've said, hey, so you want to be a DBA. What does a DBA do? Why do you want to be a DBA? Well, because I love data. And we think.
That was my answer, by the way. And I knew right
That's a typical answer.
Yeah. They told me that was the wrong answer. So now every time we interview somebody, we always ask that question. And can I tell you, they always say, because I love data, because it's because you have a job opening, but nobody wants to say that, right? And they always say it's because they love data, like every single time. And we just crack up.
Yes.
Whether they do or not.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
I would say that they should know what the job function is. They should know that I don't know is not the wrong answer. Thinking the answer is. To enlarge on Clayton's point, 2 of the best hires we got, one for our team, one for an interview I did for data engineering. I'll start with that one. We were interviewing, and I asked the question, tell me about the hardest project you ever worked on and how you navigated your way through it. And I got varying answers until I came to one candidate who said, I inherited a project from someone that was no longer there. The attendant technology was legacy. No one understood it. I had a toddler at the time. She said, I hunted down the person who left the company and made them explain it to me. And I came out of the interview and they said, what did you think? I said, there's your hire. I said, and she's fabulous. Yeah, I said, anyone with basic technical aptitude can be taught along a path, but you cannot teach that. You cannot teach that kind of passion and tenacity. The other one was a recent hire of ours where I was looking for a more senior position. And this person started off completely non-technical. They were doing manual labor. They noticed a problem with loading trucks in their company, taught themselves how to program, solved the issue, and worked their way up. I mean, he would not have needed a day of T-SQL, and I would have hired him. Because with that kind of drive, I can teach you what you need to know. So I think that those, I don't recommend that they go into a DBA interview not knowing T-SQL, but I am saying that it covers a host of sins.
Yeah, I do want to add, in our situation too, in our organization too, personally, we have gone through multiple tools. We have changed our technology a lot. So knowing the specific tech, I mean, that person could have written end-to-end code for Tesla Autopilot software fully. It wouldn't matter a lot, because tomorrow, like Clayton said, things are going to change in 10 years. All the technology would go unfamiliar, unnoticed. Maybe you'll get paid $200 for COBOL writing today, but again, the drive. And also the other thing I do look for is, again, even if you've done that, even if you have sent SpaceX rocket and gotten back, how are you with the team? How are you going to interact with the team? Matters. You could be the superhero, but if you're going to be the Black Superman or Black Adam, I'm not going to be able to take you on the team.
I have a story on that regard.
Sure, go ahead.
The company I'm at, I can't remember the guy's name, it's probably good, but they hired a guy to be on the data side, and I was supposed to keep him busy, and I was doing that, keeping him busy, got him working on stuff, and the next thing was, all right, I need him to work on there's something he needs to do in SSIS, and I just simply asked him the question because I didn't know. I was never given his resume, and I said, how well do you know SSIS? Blew up at me. He got all offended and bent out of shape because how dare I ask the great so-and-so whether he knows SSIS? Well, based on what you've demonstrated so far, I'm not real confident that you know it. So I'm just asking because I need to know how much time I need to spend explaining things to you, because we've built a whole architecture. It's not just, yes, you know what the 4 letters stand for. Can you look at a package and understand what it does and not break or fail? How much time am I going to have to spend walking you through it? And I was just like, okay, all right, we're done here. Thank you. Called his boss. I just had this very interesting conversation. And 2 days later, he was gone. He quit. But it was weird. And it was right out of the blue. I'm like, what did I do wrong? And I've had that happen in a couple other scenarios too, but it was like, I thought it was pretty clear, and I wasn't strong in my voice, or I was like, they were just like on edge. And so don't be humble is the other thing I would say, because it's possible that this great developer can make a mistake. I did today or yesterday. I made a mistake. I had to fix it. It happens. Be humble, and hopefully you don't lose your job over it. But mistakes happen, and I think being humble also allows you to ask more questions, because you can admit, I don't know this. I don't understand how this works. Can someone explain it to me? Because then you find out, oh, it's this guy that wrote it. now I can you find out who the key resources are and how it's supposed to work and get there, get it figured out.
I'm going to build on that because it's an important point. The definition, one of the defining characteristics of a profession is how much harm are you capable of doing. And the data layer definitely meets the requirements for a profession. And whether you are at the administrator level like we are, so we're operational support, or whether you're a developer or an analytics person writing things, I promise you, if you do the work long enough, you will break something. And you will probably break it badly. Have compassion when someone else does that. Please have compassion on them. Please be the one to extend the helping hand and say, hey, been there. No, even if you haven't been there, just extend the helping hand. If you have, say, hey, I have been there too. Because I promise you the next time it will be you with your hat in your hands. And this goes a long way toward developing those relationships that we talked about earlier, understanding that we're all human beings here to do a job.
Effie, what can I do to help you?
Yes. One of the things that I like about my company is when you make a mistake, there's not a lot of finger pointing, but the idea, the focus is on how can we improve the system so that this mistake is not made again. And that's made, we've made some pretty big things because of a mistake that was made, you know, so, and it's kind of fun to think of it as how can I improve the system so that other, you know, those guardrails, so that this mistake doesn't happen again. I at least want to make new mistakes, to be honest, right? But I really like that focus. And if I were interviewing for a company, I would come up with some questions to ask about how they do that focus.
Is there another question?
Sorry. Quick answer over here. I started writing blog type posts on my GitHub in Markdown and actually incorporate them in projects later too.
Okay.
And so GitHub places, if I'm looking at somebody's resume, I'm already there. That's an awesome place for it.
You could blog right from LinkedIn.
Yeah,
Yeah, I knew LinkedIn, but GitHub's a good point, yeah.
But inspired by those, and especially the launch code icon, when I'm talking to people and they're trying to figure out where to kind of start, and you know, data engineering to data analytics to DBA to all the things, and it's all getting a little. I usually say try to find a decent pond with less people fishing in it. Any help with refining that for what's going on?
I love the size of my company because we have 4 DBAs. And so what that means, we've had 3. What that means is that I'm not alone, because usually as a DBA, most companies have 1 DBA, or the company is so large that you get pigeonholed into doing one thing. And so with 3 or 4 DBAs, you have other people you can turn to. It's very collaborative. You can learn better that way. I love that size. Now, having said that, my daughter, who's a data engineer that we're going to present next month, she works for a company that has a startup culture, and that's a good fit for her. So really think about the fit for you and what you're looking for, but, you know.
If the question is really about breaking in, how do you make that initial, it's a tough one, isn't it? It's been a while for me, so there may be others who want to expound, but I can tell you I was in college and knew that I wanted to be a DBA. And I had read a blog by a guy named Brent Ozar, who said, if you think you're going to be a DBA right out of school, you can forget it. No one's going to trust you with their data right out of school. And so I started applying for every work over position I could think of or make up. I thought having the experience doing something adjacent only benefits me, only helps me to be better. It was actually during an interview for one of those positions where I realized about 10 minutes in that I was way over my head. They needed someone with far more experience. And so I told them, I ended the interview. I said, it has been wonderful to talk to you, but it seems very clear to me that you need far more experience than I have to give you. I don't want to waste your time. And they were very gracious, and I hung up the phone, and I thought, he's right, I'm screwed. Yeah, I'm out of college. I wasn't quite out of college yet. I've got 6 months to get employed before my skills start getting stale. And oh my gosh, this is so like the medical profession that I'm leaving that way. And so I started teaching myself while I worked over, and interestingly, a couple of weeks later, I got a call from that same company in recruiting saying, so you weren't a right fit for this position, but would you consider talking to the DBAs? I mean, cue Ode to Joy, the clouds parting, the whole bit. Years later, I met Brent when he was still doing his in-person classes, and he said, so tell me about yourself. And I said, I am the woman you said doesn't exist. And he said, how so? And I explained, and he said, do you know there's one other woman in the world that I know of who did that? That was Tara Kaiser, and she currently worked for him at the time. That is no longer the case. With the advent of code boot camps like Launch Code, we have a number of great candidates that we have hired from that. It does have the advantage of being free, and it has the advantage of focusing specifically on either front-based code or, more T-SQL or things like that, where I think if you have an all-over interest and you're trying to narrow that down and really explore what's good for you, I think that a 2 to 4 year program can be exactly the answer you want, because that will get you at least some top level exposure. I got a 4-year degree. I do not regret it. I got exposure to the whole stack over that time. But when it comes time to break in, you better be ready to teach yourself. You better be ready to get out there and collaborate. You need to look for and get creative with your opportunities. Be willing to work over if you need to. Connections are very important. And I guess luck plays into it a certain amount too.
Add a little bit to that. I love Brent. Brent's the dude. He's awesome. And his content is great. I've leveraged it over the years. I ended up kind of being an accidental DBA. That wasn't necessarily my interest to begin with, but everywhere I end up, I'm like, you need to clean this shit up. You got a mess, like, where's this, where's that? These things are clogged. You've got 5 years worth of logs from the engine. You need to turn on just some stuff that, like, all of a sudden, like, wow, our system's running way faster. And it's like, but a lot of those things, finding out who those people are, like Brent, right, who are like the guy to go to. And you can read their stuff. Look at their cheat sheets. I mean, he's got a cheat sheet and stored procs and things you can leverage. And if you know about them and other people don't, that's a leg up. The other thing is, I'm not a proponent of certifications, but it's a path. I've been a Microsoft certified developer for SQL Server, and I got off that treadmill about 2011, 2012, and I'm not getting back on. I can learn without. I may go through the coursework for learning some of the fabric stuff, but I've been going through a lot of it, and it's pretty straightforward. But as far as getting and paying to take a test, I'm never going to do that again. But going through the process, you will find out what you don't know, and then you can fill in some of those gaps. So it's a good thing to do.
I have a story on Brent Ozar's blog. When I interviewed for my job, I was right out of Launch Code, and so we were talking, and it was recommended to me to read Brent Ozar's blog. So I went home that night and I read his blog, like all over, as much of it as I could in one night. And then at my next interview, I made sure to bring up that I had read it. I didn't let that one slide. I did. And so I always recommend to my launch code students that if you are interviewing and they suggest looking something up before the next interview, you need to look that up. You know, so yeah, that's my Bronozar blog story.
I spell his last name.
Ozar. He's the best for, like, if you're first getting into the field, because he's funny, he makes it easy to understand, but it's still really strong content.
Like, he's very clear on the do's and don'ts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he's got good lists and good, tools which are free,
SP
Blitz, yeah. But he's got great tools and explains, what's going on or why.
Yeah. What's the name one more time?
Brent Ozar, Ozar.
BrentOzar.com. If you search for the SQL Server toolkit,
First responder, yeah.
Yeah, SQL Server First Responder Kit. You must have that in your tool chest. Yes. If you are a DBA and you don't have that, shame on you.
Yeah. And he takes it for he's writing for a lot of the accidental DBA. He really is. So it's very easy to understand.
Great for college people.
I do have a question. So again, this is geared towards people who are trying to get in, understanding the data layer. You see a hard border wall, or how fuzzy is the overlap between the roles that you're talking about today?
So fuzzy.
So when students are looking for it, even industry experts, we have so many questions about when does my hat of being a data engineer stop, and when do I become a data analyst and stuff like that. So where does take on it?
Well, like I said, we have a database engineer on our team, the DBA team. One of our former members of our DBA team moved over to data engineering. Those two seem to be very closely tied. We also have data analysts. We work really closely with data analysts because they're the ones writing the SQL code. I used to joke about hiring developers for C# and then they would write SQL. That's not so much anymore, but that was definitely the case when I first started there. But it seems pretty fuzzy. You can move somewhat depending on your own passions, because again, you may not know your passions when you first start. And then a lot of people like to leave DBAs because we're on call all the time, and move to something like a data architect or something like that. On the DBA team, when I started, my senior manager had been a developer, and then the manager had been an infrastructure person. So we had different skill sets on the team, which I think is really helpful. And I think all teams benefit from that kind of fuzzy overlap.
Yeah, I just had talking about launch code made me think back to, I worked for Countrywide, of all things. I started out at working as a Novell network engineer at a different company, quit that job, worked at Countrywide as a trainer, and that was like, I gotta get out of where I'm at because I'm tired of being a network janitor. So I wanted to do something different. And I ended up doing training, and then they started kind of their own internal, basically launch code. They brought in college interns, trained them, and so I was teaching SQL, I was teaching programming and networking, and some of the stuff I was learning on the fly, a day or two ahead of what I was teaching. And so that was a great way to learn as well and get into it. But I would say where I learned the most, the fastest, was in consulting. I was working on getting a software engineering master's that I've never finished because I got into consulting. And when you live in LA and you're going to school in Azusa, and you're working down by LAX, the commute, my final exam for C++ data structures and algorithms class, I was 2 hours late to the exam, and I finished before some people even finished. And I was just like, I sat in traffic, like, going through my head all the stuff. And when I sat down, I just went through that test. But yeah, no, it just, you can learn in all kinds of situations. But something like consulting, whether it's inside an organization or at a consulting firm, if you can get one of those jobs, it gives you a couple advantages. One, you're going to get exposed to all kinds of businesses. And you're going to find that, yeah, maybe I'm more interested in manufacturing, or maybe I really dig finance, you know, depending on what type of business you're consulting with. And then each one of those is going to have different requirements, tool sets, and needs, and you're going to get exposed to all kinds of problems. And the whole aspect of dealing with people, oh my goodness, you will learn that skill in that environment, or you're out. And typically, you're going to be around a lot of very smart people that are going to lift you up and help you move forward, because, you know, they went to the bother of picking you out and hiring you, they're going to make sure you succeed.
Back when I started, there was no notion of data engineering. So we were data engineering, we were the DBAs, we did SSIS, we did SQL Server, we did reporting services, and we had to know how it all worked. That's where the fuzziness comes from. As data engineering broke out into a separate discipline, there were a lot of common ties there. So it's a very good and organic question to ask about that kind of overlap. The skills, I will say, to be a data engineer are pretty diverse. However, that is still true of the DBA today. I was talking to a former DBA who is over a data engineering team, and they were talking about everything that data engineer had to know. And I said, so my team has to know 2 different types of SQL. They have to understand PowerShell, they have to be proficient in Python, and they're going to be learning Terraform. And I'm like, oh. That we have, our profession is changing, as I think has been pointed out earlier, and as it evolves, the breadth of what you have to know to do the job expands. That is the strength of the consulting model, as I see it, is that it allows for that flexibility, but it also allows for future-proofing and expansion while maintaining the best degree of job security.
Any other questions?
We have 3 minutes left, so question away.
Oh, 3 minutes left. Small one. So about a year ago, I remember a question that was, a couple of years ago actually, time flies. There was a dichotomy between like database and SQL type of program. Where it's like, oh, we don't do that because that's more of a developer programmer mentality. And it's like, I'm being between. It was kind of struck me, I remember. So you mentioned what you just did about Python and all this. Mm-hmm. Developers moving over, well, people starting development and then discovering that there's even more to learn on the other side and using all the development over. Elaborate on that, I guess.
Okay.
Or come to next month, meeting here.
Yeah.
I can plug.
I think that, like I said, when I started back in the day, we had to know how to run SSRS. We had to know SSIS, and we had to know T-SQL pretty much forwards and backwards. As time went on and data engineering broke off, it quickly became apparent as people moved on that I was the single source of failure where SSIS was concerned, which was not as disastrous as it sounds because data engineering took that over for us. However, with the advent of things like Databricks, if we are going I think from a managerial perspective, all I would have to do to ensure that my team was irrelevant in 3 to 5 years is nothing. Nothing. Maintain the status quo. That does not interest me, and it does not interest my team. So yes, Python, because I want them active in doing operational support of Databricks. Yes, Terraform, because I want them active in doing deployments to the cloud. I am changing the definition of what it is to be a DBA, and to change that definition means that we are going to broaden some skill sets, but the strategy of the consultant model is to reinforce that and make it possible. Does that help? Okay.
I would absolutely agree. And one interesting thing is there's been one key technology that I learned back in 1993, SQL.
Yeah.
Writing a query, that has not changed.
Yeah.
And that's been like it's like if I'd have learned, and I did learn C++, who writes C++ anymore? Very few people. Who writes C# anymore? Very few people. Yeah, there's some, but that's being replaced with React and JavaScript and those things. There's 10 different flavors of that. They will be gone eventually. There'll be something replacing that. Core of it, even with the new big data stuff, you can still write SQL.
Yeah.
It's still critical. And the fun part is a lot of stuff I'm doing today against SQL engine, I'm handing over to the guy who's doing the Databricks, and he's building out those same tables. My ETL views will compile and work on the tables he's building there. So a lot of that technology is very transferable. So I don't think you can go wrong with SQL as a core skill, because it's not going to go away. Think of how many billions and billions and billions of lines of code are out there in SQL right now. It's not going away.
I will say, possibly in conclusion, that programming languages will change. Software tools will change. The one thing that will not change is the data. The data is foundational. So whatever part of the data layer you choose to break into it because you love that layer.
True. I do have to say, with a lot of questions, especially from the student point of view too, we've seen a lot of memes about entry-level people needing 5 years of work X and tools, so hopefully that'll change as well. Having said that, from all the questions, and I have so many other questions too, probably need to have a data layer too with structured versus unstructured data. It's a totally separate topic. So having said that, I really appreciate the three of you guys. Thanks, Sharon and Clayton, with your vast wealth of experience and knowledge. I'm glad you guys were able to answer some of the questions today. Hopefully we can do this again, so you guys can come with more questions and networking opportunities. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
K-A-G-G-L-E.
Oh, okay.
Yep. We'll get it out.
No,